Okay, so I am inspired tonight to talk about how we can change because Sam Cooke's song, A Change is Gonna Come. And I just did the video where I read the poem my wife wrote, which was inspired by Sam Cooke's song. So at this point, I'm inspired to discuss with y'all how we can make a change. And I would say one thing for sure: we need unity. That is the biggest change we need. We are not unified, and therefore, when you're not unified as a people, then you're more of a victim. Think about all the different people, the different, ethnicities that have their own country, and they are unified as that country. They have a military to protect them. They have their own police force to protect the good citizens of their countries. And we as black people in America, we do not have our own police force. We have been victims of America's police force more than we've been helped by them, I would say. And we do not have our own protection, period, against all the wiles of Satan in America right now, especially with the satanic beast that's in the president's seat at this point, who obviously is a sociopath, and he is a very psychotic man with many different levels of neurosis. So he is taking the carpet from up under our feet. And I don't know if you all see it, but collectively we are falling. All right, we're falling. We're in an age right now where technology and AI are becoming the replacements for many different types of jobs that we've been doing as black people. Well, Trump called them the black jobs, right? But a lot of us are not college educated. A lot of us do not have master's degrees, and a lot of us are middle class, just working families, right? So the shit is about to hit the fan, as the studies are projecting that by the year 2035, that is in 10 years, my people, by the year 2035, if we are not going to change and we're going to stay on the same trajectory and direction that we're headed in right now, the studies say that our median income is going to be $0 per household. Yeah, household, if nothing changes. So, saying that a change is going to come, that's beautiful. But fundamentally, specifically, how is this change going to come? Well, the reason why we don't have unity, first and foremost, is because we are pretty much a broken people. We're broken hearted. We're broken to pocket. We have broken households, broken homes. And that is because we were broke. Broke, in other words. They put our people through a buck breaking process. And it broke us down in terms of us being the strong men that would lead strong homes. And we have forgotten our roles, okay? So that's why our website, Crowned in Black Love, is very important, because the knowledge within it helps us to restore our crown, okay? There are many jewels on the website. I suggest you all to tap into it and go in there and pick up some of those jewels and put them in your crown, okay? But tonight, right now, quick as I can, but thoroughly as I can, I'm going to go over what the results from the AI search through Gemini gave me back for the question I asked in not a question, but a query. I told him to explain the dehumanization process of enslaved Africans called buck breaking used by racist white people in America during slavery days. I'm going to go over that. And before I go over that, let me just real quick touch on a writing that I've been doing tonight. After I did the poem, read the poem, and I was inspired, I went down into this rabbit hole. But I'd rather not say a rabbit hole. I kind of went up into the upper room, and I wrote this right here, and it's called "No Self-Justice, No Peace, Within or Without." Now we are hollering, no justice, no peace, but are we being just to ourselves? If you ask me, if we're not being just to ourselves, then we shouldn't mind anybody else being unjust to us. For example, I was smoking cigarettes at one point in time in my younger life. And one day, I was just on the corner of our building smoking, and it occurred to me, because I was going through a change at that time, it occurred to me, I'm like, this can cause me cancer. I'm smoking a cigarette that can literally cause me cancer, and I know this. And I was like, that's not loving myself. I'm doing myself wrong. That's wrong to do to me. I love myself. And I threw the cigarette down. And I stopped smoking because I didn't want to do myself wrong. I didn't want to do myself dirty. I didn't want to be unjust to myself because I love myself. And when I realized I love myself, then I've started doing a reevaluation of everything that I was doing. And I wanted to make sure that nothing that I was doing was causing myself harm. I stopped drinking alcohol. I stopped smoking weed during that time. I wanted to stop everything that I was doing wrong to me. And that's what we have to do. I figured too, at the same time, I was like, if I'm doing myself wrong, why would I be mad at somebody else who do me wrong? But I get mad at somebody else who's doing me wrong, right? And I want them to stop doing me wrong. So how can I sit up there in my life and just keep on doing myself wrong and say, don't do me wrong, nobody else? No, if I'm doing myself wrong, that means I don't mind somebody else. I don't mind being done wrong, period. So we have to stop doing ourselves wrong. We have to reevaluate what we do to ourselves. And I'm going to tell y'all something. That is the easiest way to handle the problem of doing other people wrong. And how can we unify with one another if we are doing one another wrong? It's not right. It ain't going to work. So we have to start there with ourselves, getting ourselves right. And that's what I call self-reparations. We have to start with self-reparations first. Because do we really want to repair ourselves when we're really damaging ourselves? Do we really want to repair ourselves when we're doing destructive things to ourselves? No. That's a joke. That's a straight joke. We have to be known as a people who love themselves and who wants the best for themselves. So let's start improving ourselves, okay? So that our actions can start proving that we actually do want reparations. And I would say, regardless of how we do ourselves, we're owed reparations. Okay, true. It just doesn't make sense, though, to give reparations to a people who seem like they want to destroy themselves. Okay? So let me go ahead and read this, and then I'll get back to the book breaking, because it's very important that we understand these things. All right? So, as the original people of our planet Earth, we are called by many names. And you can click on this. I'm going to definitely put this up to where you can click on it. You can go to it. I got a blog I just created last night. I'll go ahead and put the link in the description. So we're called by many names: Afro-American, African-American, Afro-Latino, black man, black woman, Negro, mulatto, Moor, etc. And then there are slang terms. Some are used derogatorily to express underlying hate, envy, and jealousy, and some are used affectionately to express camaraderie, togetherness, or relatability. Excuse me. The name that I'd like to focus on briefly is nigger. Some of us, mostly the uneducated and ill-informed of us, call ourselves by this epithet in this modern time with a clear conscience because it's become socially acceptable and even cool. A name, like a title or label, speaks to who you are identifying or describing, your total or partial character, your nature, and or your attributes. So let's acknowledge the fact that this term nigger is an offspring of a hateful, racist, inferiorizing, and dehumanizing label, nigger, with the hard R. It was forced upon us during slavery times. Now I believe that we who use this term as a name for the kind of human we are, we do so to our detriment and as a great disservice to ourselves every time we use it to refer to ourselves and one another. And why do I believe that? Let me break it down for you. For example, if I call you by saying, "Hey, beautiful," and you accept it, the meaning of it deposits a positive, uplifting energy in your spirit and soul. But if I call you by saying, "Hey, stupid," the meaning of this word deposits a negative, peace disrupting energy in your spirit and soul if you accept it. And if you call a young, impressionable child stupid enough times and they know its meaning, the child's subconscious mind will believe it. And if they don't understand the meaning, the energy from it will still be deposited in the child. Remember, as a man or person thinketh in his heart, so is he. Or so he becomes. Alright? So every word's meaning carries its own energy regardless of how we use it and what spin we put on it. The expression, "Hey, my nigga," carries a degree of its original energy even though it's used affectionately and changed a little bit. We know where it comes from. The same goes for its feminine equivalent. "Hey, bitch." Some girls call each other that. If we're honest, really, really honest with ourselves, we know that these terms do not describe or identify a black man or woman who is existing as their highest potential self or in their more excellent state of being. Be for real. Let's agree with the truth and not fight it. Okay? So, forgive me for dragging this out, but it's important to give you a real understanding of what you understood previously about the energy of names and their impact on our spirits, minds, and souls. You now know that names deposit negative or positive energy in souls like seeds planted in the ground, and they germinate and help shape who we become. One more thing about names that you should know. Even the word name in itself has a more powerful meaning than the average education has taught us. it is synonymous with the word nature. It means the same thing as nature, but not nature as in butterflies and bees and trees. Nature as in your nature. In most eastern countries of Africa and in Asia, India, and Arabia, and etc., names are given as expressions of deep meaning, whether it's to give whether it's given to highlight the brightness of a child's spirit, the strength the parents wants to see from the child, or to establish an important memory of a person, event, benchmark, or accomplishment during the birth or pregnancy, or simply given out of deep love and affection for the child. We just need to know that the most powerful and impactful way to use names is to spark, encourage, and cultivate attributes that are innate within every person's nature, so that every time the child's name is called, it is watering that greatness within that child. Okay? So, this is the first thing that I believe we must collectively lament and repent for as black people. Now that I got that out there, we need to understand the need for lamenting and repenting in such a time as this, which has never been a time like it before. Just as the racist white people who hated us called us nigger for the purpose of inferiorizing our minds, spirits, and souls so they could be mentally dominant, we have to reverse that curse by superiorizing our minds, spirits, and souls. So, if we love ourselves and we want to become more mentally dominant than our current collective cultivation or culture has allowed, then we have to begin to change our language, switch up how we speak to and about ourselves, and that starts with calling ourselves who we actually are. It starts with love, but sometimes love ain't there, since we went through a process of buck breaking and self-hate was instilled in us. But once we change our language and we speak out of what, we speak the things that love would speak, it will end up calibrating our hearts, and we will be more in line with loving ourselves than we are now. Alright, so it starts with calling ourselves who we actually are. Not according to its geographical location, not according to a foreign landmass of earth, but according to the maker of our souls, our creator whom we are children of. We are children of God, his direct descendants, being created as the first humans, and as with all fathers, our Father who art in heaven created us to be like him and wants to see us being like him. Whether it's our fault or not, we are not like him in our behavior, nor in our overall activity on the planet. So to repent, which we need to do, is to acknowledge that you individually have committed destructive forms of wrongdoing to yourself and or someone else, and acknowledge that as a collective that we have been greatly unjust to ourselves, consciously or unconsciously, and that we should confess all of our wrongs to our Heavenly Father and ask for his forgiveness, and change our ways from the ways we learn from the world to learning his ways. So let's condemn those perspectives that caused our errors and take on the correct perspective of the Most High God so we can change our current trajectory. Okay, I could read a little further, but I think that is the bulk and meat of what I wanted to get over to you all. I still have to work on finishing this writing for the blog, and I will do so and post it. God willing, tomorrow. We'll see. But like I said, let me go ahead and read up on the book breaking. Oh, this ain't it. It must be here. Yes, right here. Here you go. All right. So, like I said, I told Gemini to explain the dehumanization process of enslaved Africans called buck breaking, used by racist white people in America during the slavery days. Now, you see, so-called President Trump is taking away DEI, and that includes taking away Black history, real Black history, Black American history, if you will, out of the schools, so that our children will not have the realities of what happened in our past to determine what is what these days and who is who. But we can't sit up here and complain about what they're not allowing. We have to find ways to provide what our children need. All right? And I believe this is one thing that I can do to help provide to our children the understandings that they need in order to move forward more superiorly. Okay? So let's talk about it. Let's read. Buck breaking was a cruel and dehumanizing practice used by some white slaveholders during the period of slavery in America. This form of torture was used to assert dominance and control, and I would like for it to say used by most white slaveholders. Okay? So much so that, what's the man's name? Lynch, Mr. Lynch, Willie Lynch, visited America, wrote a letter to the leaders in America and told them that you're destroying your property. In other words, you're killing your slaves. And let me teach you a way to mentally enslave them. All right, so that you can stop killing them. All right, so this form of torture was used to assert dominance and control, and it was particularly aimed at breaking the spirit and masculinity of enslaved African men, whom slaveholders often stereotyped as hypersexualized and strong. So their women were looking at our brothers, strong brothers, and they sexualized our men. And so the white men looked at our men as hypersexualized. No, it's a bunch of lies, basically. But we know. I just told y'all what really happened. Let me keep reading. The term itself is rooted in this racist ideology, using the word buck, a derogatory term for a strong, young enslaved man. That's what they call it, a horse too. Excuse me, a young horse, animal. Derogatory term. Dehumanization through buck breaking. The primary goal of buck breaking was to emasculate and psychologically break enslaved men. This was done to remove their identity as men and to reduce them to a state of complete submission. So in other words, they wanted us to submit to them. They wanted to take God's place, and that's a sin before God, and God's going to get them for that. Trust me. But they wanted us to be reduced to a state of complete submission. The practice was a form of sexual violence and psychological warfare that had several components. Did y'all hear that? A form of sexual violence and psychological warfare that had several components. Public humiliation. The act was often carried out publicly in front of other enslaved people. This public display served to terrorize the entire enslaved community and demonstrated the slaveholders' absolute power. It was meant to show that no one, especially not a man, could resist their authority. Sexual violence. The core of the practice was the sexual assault of enslaved men, which was meant to be the ultimate act of degradation. This violence was a tool of terror aimed at destroying an individual's sense of self and community and reinforcing the idea that enslaved people had no control over their own bodies or lives. Destruction of masculinity. By specifically targeting the masculinity of enslaved men, slaveholders sought to dismantle the family and social structures within the enslaved community. And take notes. This was particularly effective since enslaved men were often denied the right to protect their families from abuse, and this extreme violation further stripped them of their traditional roles as protectors and patriarchs. I'm gonna put you back over there. I want that to show. I'll put me over here. Perpetuation of fear. The practice created a pervasive atmosphere of fear that was passed down through generations. Hereditary behavior. Hereditary psychology. Do you see this? Passed down through generations. The psychological trauma of witnessing or experiencing such an act served as a constant reminder of the brutality of the slave system and discouraged any thoughts of resistance or rebellion. Buck breaking was one of many brutal methods used by slaveholders to maintain control. It was designed to completely strip away the humanity of enslaved people, reducing them to mere chattel and reinforcing the brutal power dynamic of slavery. All right. So with that said, again, we deserve reparations for the damage that was done to our families, to our people, to our future, which should not have been as it was. And the system of breaking us mentally and psychologically and spiritually as well became embedded into our culture, and it definitely dismantled our value system, and it sent us into a slow downward spiral of self-destructive behavior, hopelessness, helplessness. And this is why poverty still exists among us. One of the reasons. I want to go ahead and look into something else right quick. So now I'm asking, what other brutal methods were used by the slaveholders to maintain control? Alright, so beyond the horrific practice of buck breaking, slaveholders used a variety of brutal methods, both physical and psychological, to maintain control over enslaved people. These methods were designed to inflict maximum pain, break the will to resist, and reinforce the absolute power of the master. Physical and psychological torture. Whipping and beating. This was perhaps the most common form of physical punishment. Whips made of leather, rawhide, or other materials were used to inflict severe pain and leave permanent scars. The act of whipping was often public, serving as a warning to other enslaved people. Mutilation and branding. As a form of identification and punishment, slaveholders sometimes branded enslaved people with hot irons. Mutilation, such as cutting off ears or toes, or phalluses, was also used as a brutal punishment for runaways or those deemed disobedient. Restraints and implements of torture. Enslaved people were often shackled with chains, iron collars, and heavy spiked yokes that made it difficult to work, sleep, or escape. These devices were both a form of punishment and a constant physical reminder of their bondage. Sexual violence and rape. Enslaved women were particularly vulnerable to sexual abuse and rape by their slave masters and overseers. This violence was not only a physical assault, but also a way to exert power and control, often leading to mixed-race children who were born into slavery, further perpetuating the system. Dehumanizing and controlling systems. Selling and separation of families. One of the most devastating psychological tools used was the threat of or actual separation of families. Parents, children, and spouses could be sold at any moment, often for minor infractions or simply because the slaveholder needed money. This created a constant state of anxiety and fear, discouraging any attempts at rebellion. Controlling movement and communication. Slaveholders enacted strict laws and rules to control the movement of enslaved people. They were forbidden from leaving the plantation without a pass, and patrols were established to hunt down and punish anyone who was found without one. Police. That's where the police came from. This limited their ability to organize, escape, or even visit family on neighboring plantations. Forced labor and malnutrition. Enslaved people were forced to work from sunrise to sunset, often in grueling conditions with little rest and inadequate food. This chronic overwork and malnutrition weakened their bodies and made them more susceptible to disease, making resistance more difficult. Denial of education and literacy. Laws were passed across the South to prohibit enslaved people from learning to read and write. This was a critical form of control, as literacy was seen as a pathway to freedom and a way for enslaved people to access information that might inspire rebellion. These brutal methods used in combination were designed to strip enslaved people of their humanity and autonomy, reducing them to property and ensuring that the oppressive system of slavery could continue. Sad, right? Now, so now I ask the question, what was the relationship dynamic between the enslavement and the impoverishment of black people in general back then, and what are the current effects of the impoverished portion of black people nowadays? It's been on point so far. I don't disagree with anything that's been said. Alright, the relationship between the enslavement and the impoverishment of black people in America is a direct and systematic one, and the current effects of that historical dynamic are deeply rooted in today's society. The system of slavery was not just about forced labor. It was a comprehensive economic and social institution designed to prevent the accumulation of wealth and resources by black people, while simultaneously generating vast wealth for white slaveholders and the American economy as a whole. Sound familiar? The dynamic of enslavement and impoverishment. Number one, forced labor and stolen wealth. For over 200 years, enslaved Africans were forced to work without compensation. Their labor generated immense wealth in the form of cash crops like cotton, tobacco, and sugar. That was exclusively funneled to their white slave owners. This created an economy built on the foundational principle of wealth for one race at the expense of another. When slavery ended, black people were left with no land, no savings, and no capital to start their lives as free citizens. Number two, post-slavery economic suppression. The end of slavery did not lead to economic parity. Instead, new systems were put in place to maintain the economic subjugation of black people. Sharecropping. Many formerly enslaved people were trapped in sharecropping agreements, which were essentially new forms of economic bondage. They were forced to work on the same land they had been enslaved on, paying the landowner a share of their crops and often falling into a cycle of inescapable debt. Jim Crow laws. The Jim Crow era instituted a wide range of discriminatory laws and practices that made it nearly impossible for black people to build wealth. These laws enforced segregation in housing, education, and employment, denying black people access to better paying jobs, quality schools, and the opportunity to buy homes in appreciating neighborhoods. Exclusion from federal programs. Many of the federal programs designed to build the American middle class, such as the Homestead Act, the New Deal, and the GI Bill, were either explicitly or implicitly structured to exclude black Americans. White families were given land, loans, and educational opportunities, allowing them to accumulate generational wealth, while black families were systematically denied these same chances. violence and theft. Whenever black individuals or communities managed to achieve a degree of economic prosperity, they were often met with violent attacks from white folks. The Tulsa Race Massacre of 1921, where a thriving black business district known as Black Wall Street was burned to the ground, is a stark example of this. These acts of racial terrorism ensured that any progress made by black communities was quickly and brutally erased. Current effects on impoverished black people nowadays. The historical denial of wealth accumulation and economic opportunity has created a devastating legacy of generational poverty that continues to affect black communities today. The racial wealth gap. This is one of the most significant and persistent effects. The median black family today has a small fraction of the wealth of the median white family. This gap is not just a matter of income, it's a reflection of historical disadvantages, as wealth is often passed down through generations in the form of home ownership, inheritances, and financial investments. Disparities in housing. Due to decades of discriminatory practices like redlining, which denied home loans to black people in certain neighborhoods, many black families were unable to buy homes. This meant they missed out on the primary way most Americans build wealth, and they were often relegated to neighborhoods with less investment, poorer infrastructure, and lower performing schools. Educational and employment inequities. While progress has been made, systemic issues persist. Historically underfunded schools in predominantly black neighborhoods often led to poorer educational outcomes. In the job market, black workers face higher unemployment rates, and even with the same qualifications, they often earn less than their white counterparts because of racist people. Health disparities, which is a system that's maintained by racist people. All right. In secret, okay? Health disparities. Poverty is directly linked to poor health outcomes. Big facts. Black communities faced higher rates of chronic diseases like hypertension and diabetes, often due to a lack of access to healthy food options, quality health care, and safe living conditions. Mass incarceration. The disproportionate incarceration of black people, a legacy of a legacy of a justice system with roots in racial control. That's more like an injustice system with roots in racial control, has a devastating economic and social impact. A criminal record can bar an individual from employment, housing, and other opportunities, perpetuating the cycle of poverty for their families and communities. In essence, the economic oppression of slavery and its aftermath created a systemic disadvantage that has been compounded over generations. The current state of impoverishment in many black communities is not a result of a lack of effort, but a direct and predictable consequence of centuries of legalized and institutionalized racism that prevented wealth accumulation and actively stripped away resources. What y'all think about that? Okay, now I asked, according to today's political and social climate, what are some things black people can do as a plan of action to change the trajectory of their plight and predicted economic crisis of being at $0 median income by 2035? I don't know if y'all knew that, but it's a study done by several different groups. All right. It says the prediction that the median black household wealth could drop to zero by 2053, not 35. As previously thought, but still a deeply concerning timeline, highlights the systemic nature of the racial wealth gap. Addressing this requires a multifaceted approach that combines individual and community level actions with systemic policy change. Number one, financial and economic empowerment. Prioritize financial literacy and education. There's a growing movement to educate black communities on financial fundamentals. This includes topics like budgeting, saving, investing, and understanding credit scores. Organizations like the National Black Church Initiative and various community groups are creating resources and workshops to make this information accessible. Support and build black-owned businesses. Consciously supporting black-owned businesses is a direct way to keep wealth circulating within the community. Entrepreneurship is a crucial vehicle for wealth creation, and increased support can help these businesses grow, create jobs, and build a more robust economic infrastructure. Initiatives like the Black Economic Alliance are focused on this very goal. Invest in home ownership and real estate. Home ownership has historically been the primary driver of generational wealth in the United States. A plan of action could involve increasing efforts to educate prospective black home buyers on navigating the mortgage process, understanding predatory lending, and leveraging down payment assistance programs. Practice group economics and cooperative investing. The concept of group economics involves pooling resources to achieve collective goals. This can take the form of cooperative businesses, community land trusts, or investment clubs where members collectively invest in stocks, real estate, or local enterprises. This strategy can leverage the collective power of community to build wealth that benefits many. Number 2, political and social advocacy. Advocate for policy changes. The racial wealth gap is a direct result of public policy. Therefore, political action is essential. This includes housing policy, advocating for policies that address historical redlining, combat housing discrimination, and increase access to affordable and appreciating housing. Tax reform, supporting progressive tax policies and reforms that benefit low to moderate income families, such as a more equitable distribution of tax credits and a more progressive taxation of extreme wealth. Educational funding, pushing for equitable funding for schools in predominantly black neighborhoods to ensure that all students have access to quality education, which is a key to economic mobility. Criminal justice reform, advocating for reforms that reduce mass incarceration and its devastating economic impact on individuals and families, such as policies that remove barriers to employment and housing for those with criminal records. Support community-based organizations. Backing organizations and nonprofits that are on the front lines of economic empowerment is critical. These groups provide financial counseling, business development resources, and legal aid, and they are often the most effective in reaching and assisting community members. Push for reparations discussions. While a contentious issue, the conversation around reparations for the descendants of enslaved people is gaining some traction. Proponents argue that a comprehensive reparations program is a direct way to address the wealth gap created by centuries of unpaid labor and systemic discrimination. Engaging with this discussion and advocating for a feasible program is a form of long-term political action. Individual and family actions. Build an emergency fund and reduce debt. On an individual level, establishing a savings cushion can provide financial stability and a buffer against unexpected crises. Aggressively paying down high-interest debt, such as credit cards or payday loans, frees up income that can be used for saving and investing. Plan for generational wealth transfer. Black families are less likely to receive large inheritances than white families. A proactive plan of action involves making a concerted effort to create and execute estate plans, including wills, trusts, and life insurance policies, to ensure that wealth can be passed down to future generations. Mentorship and networking. Building strong social and professional networks can lead to better job opportunities, business partnerships, and access to valuable financial knowledge. Mentorship from financially successful individuals within and outside the community can provide guidance on navigating complex economic systems. It is important to acknowledge that these actions are not a quick fix. They represent a long-term, multi-generational effort to dismantle systemic barriers and build a new foundation for economic prosperity. The focus is on a combination of self-help, community solidarity, and persistent political engagement to achieve lasting change. Well, out of all that information, make sure that you drop your thoughts and comments, because we really want to know what you think. We want to have an exchange. We don't just want to put out information and, you hit a like button and subscribe. No, we want to actually engage with you. We want to exchange ideas with you. We want to actually, hear what you have to offer to us. As a matter of fact, if there's anything that you would like for us to point out or to highlight, please drop that in the comments too, and we just may take your suggestions. If there's anything that I just read that you want to respond to at length, we would definitely be willing to look at a video that you might want to, place here in our description, our comments, and we will review it and perhaps in turn place it inside of our description of this very video right here for others to look at, or we may just put it, up there on YouTube to where they can link to your video if it's pertinent and it's compatible with what we just read. I just read today. Okay, so I'm very, very sleepy.